Today, we're heading off to London. And I'm happy to extend an invitation to everyone to join, but mind you, London is like that bottomless bag from your favorite magical story. There's just so much to see that, as usual, I'll point out the main attractions, and then you can create your very own London adventure. Now, here's the thing. London gave me a run for my money. It's the first place where I couldn't tick off every spot on my to-do list in a single day. Fear not though, I've got your back. I'll be sharing detailed maps of our tour in the video description so you won't miss a bit. Plus, I managed to snag a few extra hours to explore those main attractions I initially missed. So it turned into a 2-day extravaganza, and I'm splitting this episode into 2 parts. Let's go. First day, I rolled into Euston station. My game plan was to kick things off in West London and then circle back through the city centre. The very first thing that caught my eye on the way was St. Pancras Church. But to be honest, it's as ordinary as a cup of tea. It's not that ancient either, having been built in the early 19th century, so I didn't dwell on it for too long. Funny enough, my next stop was also a church. Euston Church they call it. It's even younger than St. Pancras, sprouting up in the mid-19th century. People back then were not thrilled with its unoriginal design, but later someone had a change of heart, and now it's considered a religious architectural gem, somehow magically combining the traditions of the 13th and the 15th centuries. Talk about quirks of perception, right? Now, let's take a whimsical stroll through the vibrant streets of London, shall we? You see, London is a place where appearances can be quite deceiving. For instance, you might come across a building that seems all grand and fancy, but in reality, it's just a bookshop. Talk about a clever disguise, right? But here's the kicker. The whole area we're wandering through is like the university's secret garden. Even Euston Church, it's been a go-to spot for local students for ages. Most of the buildings around us have a connection with one of London's universities, University College. Take a gander at that university library and hospital entrance. It's not just about books, it's about knowledge and a lot of history. Now, right across the library, you'll spot some less fancy faculty buildings. But trust me, they're still dishing out top-notch education. It's likely because the whole sport has some magical academic aura. In fact, right here, Charles Darwin once called home after his famous Beagle expedition. So this place oozes history from every brick and cobblestone. And here's a neat tidbit for you. Check out these glass pieces. Any idea what they are? No, they're not some mystical artifacts, but they're just clever devices. Unique glass prisms to bring natural light into basements. They pop up in other places as well, but here in London they're treated like precious gems, and they've stood up the test of time in tip-top condition. Moving right along, we encounter another building that might look like a church at first glance. Well, it used to be one, but due to lack of religious enthusiasm, it's been transformed into a versatile event space. You can host a birthday bash or even tie the knot here, and it looks very convenient too. You can grab fresh flowers for the bride right on the spot. On the flip side of the road, if you fancy, you can spot a rather modest tribute to Charles Dickens. This memorial was set up in the late 1950s near the site where the legendary author actually lived. Typically, these houses come with classic blue plaques like the one I showed you at Darwin's place. But when you're as iconic as Charles Dickens, you get the royal treatment. There used to be a blue flag, of course, you could even spot it on a snap from 1957, but there's another Dickens house nearby, which has now become a museum. So they had to knock down this house and slap up a rather unsurprising office building with a bas-relief in the corner. Now, onwards to a famous stop in London, Madame Tussauds Museum. I'll be honest with you, I've never quite grasped the joy of gawking at wax figures, even if they are exquisitely crafted. And if you fancy a photo with one of the stars, be prepared to join a rather sizable queue. But the silver lining, you'll be under a roof. So rain or shine, you'll be in for some waxing fun. As I was closing in on another must-see spot on London's map, a rather intriguing building caught my eye. Nowadays, it's a residential complex. But during World War II, it played host to the Special Operations Executive. It is them who were the masterminds behind daring missions like Operations Freshman and Gunnerside, where they took on the task of sabotaging a hydroelectric plant in occupied Norway, producing heavy water for the German atomic project. On that very building, but around the other side, you'll come across a plaque marking the spot where they kicked off the construction of the underground part of the London Metro in 1861. One of the original stations is right under this sign, and if you check, it looks pretty much the same after a solid 160 years. Even the lamps, they're blast from the past. Welcome to Baker Street Station. Now, off we go towards the museum, if you can call it that about a fictional character, of Sherlock Holmes. As we recently learned, Mr. Holmes could have very well hopped on the same metro station I just showed. But despite all his detective needs, Holmes hardly ever used it, if we believe Sir Conan Doyle, of course. This whole street is like a symphony of Sherlock Holmes. Sometimes it hits the right note, like the metro station bedecked with tiles showcasing the most famous detective consultant and his iconic profiles. If you take a closer look, these profiles are actually made up of tiny Sherlock Holmes figures. But hey, sometimes this tune isn't quite harmonious. Some business ventures, well, they didn't quite hit the right note. In the Grand Tapestry of London, you'll find a wide array of sculptures, each with its own level of recognition. Take this one, for example. It's easily distinguishable because of the dragon, and indeed, this is St. George. But it's more than that. It's a tribute to the local folks who perished in the First and Second World Wars. Oh, and there's a second casting of this very sculpture, now in Newcastle. But the other bas-relief you see here, well, it's just a decorative touch on a residential building. While I was exploring all these gems, I finally came across our next destination. It's Abbey Road Studios and the iconic zebra crossing where McCartney once strolled barefoot. That very crossing still sits on the same spot, and you'll see tourists sauntering across it, much to the slight annoyance of drivers. Some folks take a leisurely walk, snap a few photos, and the drivers slow down, letting the pedestrians have their moment. The studio itself is a little further down the road, standing unassumingly behind the fence. It's still up and running, and for die-hard fans out there, the fence posts are painted white. They do it like a clockwork every couple of months. Then they clean it and it starts all over again. Some folks walk away feeling like they've left an indelible mark, while others budget for a monthly paint bucket alongside their trash disposal costs. Well, I guess this is all part of the Abbey Road experience. Further along Abbey Road is a church that might remind you of the temple. We'll swing by there later, but first let me spill some history. This church was erected back in 1863, and it's where the Abbey Road Building Society was initially set up. Fast forward, and that society evolved into Abbey National before getting gobbled by a big bang. Building societies are a peculiar financial entity in Britain and the Commonwealth countries. At first, they were like a collective piggy bank helping their members to fund their housing projects. But over time, these societies morphed into banking counterparts, and today they're essentially banks in the eyes of the average Joe. Now brace yourself, because our next stop is a bit of a hidden gem when it comes to London excursions. I'm here to shine a light on the Church of St. Mark. It might not be the oldest stop on our route, and it's certainly seen better days, especially after fire in January 2023. But this church has a charming tale to tell. You see, it was this church rector, Canon Robinson Duckworth, who once played matchmaker and introduced one of his parishioners, Charles Dodgson, to the young daughter of his another friend, the Dean of Oxford College, Henry Liddell. Charles was so taken with the little miss that he penned a fairy tale where she, along with her sisters, Lorena and Edith, took the center stage. Now, you might know Charles Dodgson better by his pen name. Lewis Carroll, that is. And the young girl, she's obviously none other than Alice. And those photographs you've glimpsed? Yes, Lewis Carroll himself was the man behind the camera. After passing some charming half-timbered houses, my personal favorites, I've got a soft spot for them as you might recall from my Birmingham escapade, and some unknown but beautifully blossoming trees, you'll find yourself at one of London's most famous parks. Hyde Park and its buddy, Kensington Gardens. The fun fact is, they were a single park until 1728. London's parks have a story all their own. What's remarkable is the abundance of wildlife, from stately geese and swans to playful squirrels. Even us, two-legged creatures, enjoy leisurely strolls or brisk jogs, and here's the kicker. There's nary a keep off the grass sign in sight. And let me tell you, the parks are the only place in London where I've witnessed dogs gleefully romping around without a leash, chasing sticks and each other. Sure, they might have their eyes on the squirrels, but London squirrels are no dummies. They've evolved, and catching them isn't as easy as it seems. Now, our journey leads us to one of the most iconic non-monumental monuments in Kensington Park, the Peter Pan statue. You see, Peter Pan, the boy who never grows up, ended up in this tale right here and met some fairies. I used to think that this statue is tucked away in a quiet corner, but it's actually perched near the long water pond. On its pedestal, just as you'd expect, you'll find the beloved characters from the story, including scores of bunnies and fairies. Mind you, no crocodiles there. James Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, commissioned the statue himself, and then rather audaciously placed it in Kensington Gardens back in 1912 without any prior approval. Who knew you could do that at all? A bit of a scandal ensued, but they eventually let the statue be. And get this, 6 more statues were cast from the same mold. Today you'll find them in Liverpool, Brussels, Perth, American Camden, and Canadian St. John's and Toronto. In the nighttime, the park's gates are locked up tight. To help visitors find their way out, they have thoughtfully posted signs, though I must admit, back when they locked me in the park years ago, I couldn't spot those signs. And I went leaping over for the exit like an antelope over the hurdles. Good times, I tell you. But let's keep our stroll going. We'll meander through the park, making our way past the round pond to a seemingly unassuming structure. But this is no ordinary building. Say hello to Kensington Palace, spruced up in the 17th century by none other than Christopher Wren. It used to be a suburban mansion of the Earl of Nottingham. Can you imagine the distance from the capital at that time? Nowadays, it's the official residence of the junior branch of the royal house. Even Queen Victoria took her first breath here, commemorated by a monument right out front. By the way, a bit of royalty trivia for you. Princess Diana once called this place home. And now it's Prince William and Kate Middleton's turn to take the reins. If you're curious, you can hop on a guided tour of the palace for some 25 quid, but I had to keep my pace and move along. A short jaunt from the palace, you'll spot the Albert Hall, a spot known for hosting some of London's finest concerts. Right across from it, you'll find a monument dedicated to Prince Consort Albert. He tragically succumbed to typhus in 1861, leaving his loving wife Queen Victoria heartbroken. Looking over the shoulder, yes, it is that Queen Victoria who was born in Kensington Palace we have just seen. Now, the monument is a real neo-Gothic gem erected in 1875. Its highlight is a gilded sculpture of Prince Albert himself, seated and overlooking the Albert Hall, and decked out with a magnificent ciborium adorned with golden mosaics and an inscription that's a dedication to the memory. Each side is devoted to an art form: poetry, fine arts, architecture, and sculpture, showcasing their finest practitioners. Right up top, you'll find the cardinal virtues, and just below Prince Albert there are 8 sculptures representing the arts and sciences from astronomy to rhetoric. But there's more to see. This grand structure is encircled by sculptures of a more down-to-earth nature, like agriculture, engineering, commerce and manufacturing. All the empire rests upon. Supporting this entire ensemble is a frieze, adorned with 169 figures representing all those arts I mentioned earlier. They are arranged differently on each side, adding an extra layer of intrigue. And the whole monument is also adorned with allegorical statues symbolizing the vastness of the British Empire. They are Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. Now let's shift our focus for a moment from these monuments and peek at Hyde Park. Beyond the living creatures, domestic and otherwise, this park holds some unexpected surprises, if you know where to look. I'll reveal my favorite park monument shortly, but first, let's make our way to Speaker's Corner. This spot is quite renowned in Hyde Park, and some countries even try to replicate it. There were some hiccups along the way, with folks expressing their opinions a bit too freely, and eventually some countries scrapped the idea. But guess what? The Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park is still there, and this country didn't fall apart because of it. As you explore the Speaker's Corner, it's indeed like a bustling marketplace of ideas where people stand up, broadcast and argue about all sorts of topics, from ecology to preschool education. And of course, you'll find an array of eccentrics and religious preachers sharing their beliefs.
Jesus is King of Kings. Jesus is Lord of Lords. I don't think genuine education happens in established schools. Well, Samuel Johnson and Favre decorated the legacy. Right. Now, patriotism back then meant something different to what it means today.
As you look around, you'll spot vast fields of daffodils nearby. They're a common sight throughout England, but they seem to bloom even more vibrantly here. And now, my personal favorite. A monument dedicated to the valiant war animals. These unsung heroes transported supplies, carried weapons, and saved lives without being asked if they wanted to be in the midst of conflict, or if the lands they died for held any value for them. While humans can be influenced by propaganda and lofty ideas of grandeur, animals merely go where they're sent. Exiting Hyde Park, you'll encounter a lawn, no longer with daffodils but boasting other charming blooms. In the backdrop is his London residence, and just outside stands a monument to yet another military luminary, the Duke of Wellington. He was a real character, best known as the conqueror of Napoleon and a dandy, although he famously refused to acknowledge equal rights for the Jewish community. The arch beside the monument is one of those triumphal arches created to celebrate victory over Napoleon, much like the Marble Arch just to the north. Originally it was designed as a ceremonial passage leading straight to Buckingham Palace. But due to later square reconstructions, the arch had to be moved and turned around, so it now stands somewhat apart from the direct path. Inside the arch, you'll find rooms that were once London's tiniest police department. These days, it's a museum where you can climb to the top of the arch and take in a bird's-eye view of the Hyde Park. The other side of the arch serves as the ventilation hood for the London Underground, leading to occasional reports of the arch being on fire, thanks to some local humor or a genuine delusion. Today, the arch is crowned by a quadriga, though that wasn't always the case. In the past, there was a colossal equestrian statue of the Duke of Wellington, not the one you see beside the arch, but a massive 8-meter-tall sculpture. This statue was relocated to Aldershot, where it still stands today, at the end of the 19th century. Beyond the Wellington Arch, a road leads up Constitution Hill. Speaking of which, the Constitution I have to mention that in Britain it still does not exist as a single document and is rather composed of a set of laws and rules from various ages. At the very start of the road, you'll encounter monuments dedicated to Britain's numerous wars, from Africa to Asia. Now, if you follow the direct path, it will take you to the most famous London palace, the Buckingham Palace. Covering it in a brief episode is quite the challenge, given its grandeur, so let me simply mention the essentials. The guards, both the real deal and the ceremonial ones, and of course the ever-present throngs of curious tourists. Right across from the palace, there's a memorial to Queen Victoria. The very same who was born in Kensington, mourned the loss of her husband to typhus and reigned as one of the most beloved British queens. Above the memorial stands a golden statue of Victory, and the 3 sculptures around it represent homeland, justice and truth. The entire ensemble is adorned with nautical motifs, symbolizing Britain's maritime might. Now, those 4 surrounding figures with the lions. They symbolize peace, progress, agriculture, apparently it's a local favorite, and industry, the pillars of the British Empire. Interestingly, agriculture and industry are a gift from New Zealand, while peace and progress were not on the present list. By the way, the money for this monument didn't come from the government coffers. It was a collective effort that took several years, with everyday folks, the Australian Parliament, and even African tribes chipping in. The London Eye is already noticeable, yet there are many fascinating places to explore before we get there. As you make your way out of the park, the map suggests a detour, but you can actually cut straight through. And before you know it, you'll find yourself on the parade ground of the Royal Horse Guards. Take a look at the ground covering. It's specially designed for horseback riding. And on your left, you'll spot the old Admiralty building. Now, the guards might not be on the horseback at the moment, but they're always ready for a mounted shift. Pay attention to their boots. These tall fronts were the brainchild of the very same Duke of Wellington. They provide extra protection for the rider's legs. Even though the guards aren't on the horseback right now, there are signs posted in preparation for equestrian duties. And finally, we arrive at Whitehall, the street of government buildings. These are the gates leading to the famous Downing Street, the entrance to number 10. Interestingly, not all prime ministers have resided in number 10. For instance, David Cameron preferred the roomy apartment above number 11. During the war, Winston Churchill made it a point to be seen regularly entering the doors of his residence to show he wasn't abandoning the nation. Speaking of Churchill, his office and the common bunker were located just next street. Today there's a museum. Opposite Downing Street stands a touching monument, this time dedicated to the women who stepped into the roles of men during the Second World War. Whitehall Street itself leads to the most famous landmark in all of London, the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben. On the other side of the square, you'll find a small park with a few sculptures. Most of them depict British activists, military figures and politicians such as Churchill, Lloyd George and Millicent Fawcett. You might be surprised to see Gandhi on them, however back then he was also a British political figure. The statues exhibit a wide range of styles and execution. Lloyd George is somewhat toy-like and Palmerston leads towards the romantic. Smith Stanley stands atop a massive pedestal, while Mandela is nearly at ground level. Now, from the other side, it is the Westminster Abbey that overlooks the square. But let's be honest, you can't really do it justice in just a couple of minutes. It's the British Pantheon, serving as the final resting place for some of the island's greatest minds. From Newton and Darwin, whom I mentioned earlier today, to Rutherford and Hawking. It's been the backdrop for coronations, royal weddings and funerals. It's more of a ceremonial site than a religious one now, and it's quite accessible. For 27 quid, anyone can take a selfie with the graves of Dickens, Mary Stuart and Livingstone. Opposite the Abbey, in Parliament's courtyard, there's a rather unexpected monument to Oliver Cromwell from 1899. And it's still standing, despite the fact that Cromwell himself dissolved Parliament more than once. Interestingly, for the first time, I'm not seeing any protests in front of Parliament this time around. During my previous visits, there was almost always a tent or a demonstration, whether against everything or for every good cause, with the police usually keeping a watchful eye. By the way, what about the police? Just before the entrance to the Houses of Parliament, there's a plaque in memory of Constable Keith Palmer, who lost his life in the 2017 terrorist attack. Memorials to those killed are also on the Westminster Bridge, where the attack began. On the opposite side of the river, you'll discover a more entertainment and tourist-oriented area. Here, you'll find the London Dungeon Museum and Europe's largest suspended Ferris wheel, the London Eye. But most importantly, you'll get stunning views of the Thames and the opposite bank, for the first time during the entire walk. To ensure that Parliament buildings aren't obscured by the Westminster Bridge, it's best to take a detour, initially heading to the right, away from the London Eye. Then just walk past it and cross the Golden Jubilee Bridge to return to the north bank of the Thames. Just like at any other tourist hotspot, you'll find all the necessary fixtures here. The poor elderly lady might easily be some 30 years old, and right around the corner she might have her regular attire and her car. This is where the memories of Sherlock Holmes often return to me. For some reason, the only station I associate with him is Charing Cross, accessible from the bridge. But this time, I won't be heading to the station. Instead, I'll pass by a classic telephone booth with an unconventional black hue and Wi-Fi as I make my way toward Piccadilly. By the way, the famous Piccadilly is not called Piccadilly Square, but Piccadilly Circus. Its name dates back to the stiff collars known as Piccadilly that were in vogue in the 16th and 17th centuries. A merchant named Robert Baker made his fortune by selling these collars and built his Piccadilly Hall estate near here in 1611. The origin of the word circus is more complex. On one hand, it's a nod to the Roman heritage that local shopkeepers wanted to evoke. Most likely, the square originally had a circular shape, as one theory suggests. In front of one of the buildings overlooking it, there was reportedly a large circular area known as round regal, which not only left this part of the name in history, but also influenced the square's classic rectangular shape. Nonetheless, the square is often recognized by the curved electronic advertising screen that replaced the stationary billboard on the building's corner. But there's also a Victorian statue with a love legend in Piccadilly. Some mistake it for Eros, but it's actually a statue of Eros, the god of requited love. Legend has it that if a couple kisses where he is aiming, which is somewhere around here, they're guaranteed love and happiness. Of course, it's just another bit of nonsense. Although it actually came true for me. I just hope that the girl I kissed here is doing well too. By this time, it's starting to get dark, and I'm slowly making my way to the station. At this point, it's clear that I won't be able to see everything I had planned in London, and I'll need to schedule another visit. But for now, here's the world's oldest toy store, Hamleys. It might not be the biggest, but it's certainly the oldest. Around the corner from the toy store is another notable London shop, Liberty, known for its fabrics and collaborations with emerging designers. The famous dandy and fashionista Oscar Wilde was a frequent visitor to Liberty in his time. But to be honest, it's not the merchandise that piques my interest, but the architecture. In 1924, the store was refurbished using wood from 2 Royal Navy ships, Hyde and Hindustan. To give you an idea of the size of these ships, the half-timbered facade on Marlborough Street, which you can see now, is as long as was the HMS Hindustan. Meanwhile, cultural life is in full swing. People are patiently queuing up for their dose of spiritual nourishment. Here, a meeting with Quentin Tarantino is taking place. Regrettably, I missed out on it, lacking both a ticket and the time to attend. As the daylight dwindled, I decided to amble over to my station. En route, I couldn't simply pass by a truly striking edifice, but to my surprise, it turned out to be a mere hotel. And there stands the first station, St. Pancras. Frankly, it's nothing extraordinary. Well, except for the fact that during its construction, it boasted the widest unsupported span in the world, a staggering nearly 75 meters. Nested at the edge of the platform is an endearing statue. Although it's rather towering for my liking. It's impressively colossal from a distance, but you might not even notice it if you're far away. In this immediate vicinity, there are as many as 3 stations. I'll revisit Euston later. For now, I've showcased St. Pancras, but my actual destination is right here, King's Cross. It holds a special place in my heart for personal reasons, but I'm more than willing to conjure up a tourist justification for you to visit. Somewhere here between the 9th and 10th platforms. Truth be told, there's no need to venture there. Those are standard platforms, and the one you look for is to the right, facing the turnstiles. They even provide you with a scarf in your chosen house colors if you've already decided on your faculty. With nightfall outside, the hotel I recently pointed out has been completely swallowed by shadows. And I opted to complete a circuit around the British Museum. Along the way, I encountered a rather peculiar house with glass walkways, a sight I've never witnessed before. And there's another blue plaque marking the spot where James Barrie, the creator of Peter Pan, once resided. You may recall the monument I showed earlier in Kensington Gardens. Finally, here stands the British Museum itself. Of course, it's long been closed for the day, but that might be for the better. The absence of crowds allows you to truly grasp the grandeur. The collection is absolutely remarkable, though the appearance of some exhibits here does raise questions. If you have the time, I highly recommend a visit, especially since, kudos to the British for this, the entry is free. Where else can you behold the Rosetta Stone? At this juncture, night had fallen, and there was precious little time left before my train departure. I began my trek towards the station, all the while observing the distinct English manner of politely conveying threats and the presence of curious contraptions. I wonder if anyone can discern what it is. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments if you know, or would like to make a guess.